our subject matter today is sleep. And listen to this, guys. Sleep has the most potential for positive impact on athletic performance, more than training modifications, coaching, nutrition, or conditioning. Scientists have called it the most potent performance enhancing activity that we know of. In other words, there's nothing you can do. There's no drug, no routine, no food you can eat that's going to have a bigger impact on your performance than sleep. So welcome. We're going to get to everything. First, I want to introduce my co-host, Dr. Sam Minyar. Sam, thank you so much for doing this with me. I'm really excited. This is our second one, and you're here from the beginning, which is a good one. The wind or the weather has gotten you once or twice, but Sam, he's a sports psychologist who's worked with many professional and college teams, as well as elite athletes and youth sports athletes. He also happens to write a great monthly column for I Love to Watch You Play called Ask Dr. Sam. Today, we just put one up about conquering fear after you've been injured. Sam, thank you so much for doing this together.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited. Dr. Bender's one of my favorite follows on Twitter, so I'm excited to share her with the world here.
And Dr. Bender, we're so happy to have you. You're an award-winning sleep scientist. I mean, you know who you are, but let me tell everybody else. She's an award-winning sleep scientist. She's earned national recognition working with athletes and researching and writing about sleep. She's been interviewed for stories in Oprah Magazine, Parade Magazine, a frequent podcast guest and TED Med panelist. Dr. Bender also happens to be a former college basketball player and a mother of three. Nod to both those things, Dr. Bender. We have that in common. And her current title is Director of Clinical Sleep Science at Cerebra. Dr. Bender, it's so great to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
All right, well, let's dig in. Go ahead, Sam.
I was just going to say, maybe you could start off by telling us, why is sleep so important? What's the big deal with sleep in sport?
I mean, as you mentioned in the intro, I believe sleep is the biggest performance enhancer out there. So it helps our decision making. It helps our reaction time. It helps our overall physical and mental health. And we can go into some of those in more detail. But with poor sleep, we see those things suffering, and really important for athletes specifically to help athletes stay in the game. It helps with immunity. It helps with injury risk. So really important thing that it's not you're doing it on your off time. So it takes a little bit of prioritization.
Could you say it's an epidemic, sleep problems? I know, definitely with adult population, but is there some way to sort of quantify that as a country or as a society that we have sleep problems?
About a third of adults across the world have either sleep deprivation or sleep disorders. So it's a huge chunk. 50% of people in their lifetime will suffer from insomnia. So that's another big stat. And, those types of things show impact on even our economy and people missing work due to sleep deprivation or being present, but not really present, during the workday. So, I would say, we're not there yet to where people are going to automatically try and optimize it.
As more people become aware of the impacts on sleep, it seems like sleep is actually getting worse. When I talk to my clients, they have horrible sleep habits, and how much of an impact is this on our sleep?
Well, first I'll say, being a sleep scientist mom, I think it's important to get the message out there, but I think it can, in fact, create anxiety. And my son is a good example of this. He's 8 years old. He is more of that, anxious type. And I talk about the importance of sleep, and then he can kind of freak out when he's not able to fall asleep on time. So we have to kind of create a balance in the messaging for sure. When it comes to electronic devices, it's more, it's about the blue light, number one, but number two, it's about the content that you're looking at as well. So blue light can be alerting to our brain. It can reduce our melatonin and it can wake us up. So when we're using our electronic devices right before bedtime, that's when we want our melatonin to be optimized and at its peak. So it could have an impact on our overall sleep quality if we're using our electronics right up until bedtime. But it's also about the content as well. The content can be arousing. The content can, give us cortisol hits depending on what we're looking at. So best thing to do would be to put those electronic devices away about an hour before bedtime.
You mentioned melatonin. For our listeners who maybe don't understand what melatonin is, could you give us a layperson's description of melatonin?
Melatonin is our sleepiness hormone. So it starts to get released about 2 hours before bedtime and then peaks during the night. So about 4 a.m., we start to see our highest levels of melatonin. And of course, this varies depending on the person. So a person who is more of a night owl, like a teenager, an adolescent who biologically is releasing melatonin about 2 hours later than an adult is going to be releasing that melatonin later. And so, it's more like 6 a.m. may be their peak in melatonin rise. So we have to be aware of that. And I know your audience is adolescent athletes. So trying to, I hear a lot where teens are lazy for wanting to sleep in. Well, no, actually, in reality, it's a part of their biology. So there is variation in when we release melatonin, and it's that sleepiness hormone that's occurring, and different things can impact melatonin, the number one being light. So light sends a signal to our brain to wake up, and also reduces our melatonin. So the timing of that light at night is not good right before bedtime, but the timing of that light in the morning is really good because it's reducing that melatonin when we wake up, and it's actually creating better sleep quality throughout that night if I'm getting lots of light in the morning.
So does that mean then, is there a difference in quality if you try to get your kids to go to bed, let's say it's a weekend, earlier rather than sleeping in later? So is it better to get up earlier with the sun, you're saying, than it is? So it does change the quality of sleep you get depending on which end you're getting it?
Yeah, so ideally we want to align our sleep with our chronotype. So chronotype meaning to be, if you're more likely to be a night owl, you ideally want to go to bed later and wake up later because then it's more in alignment with your biology. However, there are early morning trainings, there's school. So It makes it pretty challenging to do that. And with actually COVID, we saw that teenagers were actually sleeping better during COVID because they didn't have a lot of those responsibilities in the morning. They were able to go to bed later and sleep in later because, they're not having to go into school. So ideally we want to align our sleep schedule with our chronotype. But if we don't have that capability, which is probably the majority of adolescents, we want to block light at night, maybe wearing blue light blocking glasses, and then get lots of light in the morning. And that may be using light glasses in the morning. So there's different strategies that we can kind of trick our circadian rhythm into being on a more normal schedule.
And just for everyone, I mean, some of the people that might be listening aren't even sure what is the ideal amount of sleep. So what is it dependent upon the person, or is there an actual ideal amount?
Yes, let me see if I can share my screen here, and I have a slide on this. Let's see here. Okay, hopefully you can see that.
Yep.
Okay, so this is a sleep duration recommendations based on ages. So here we have in blue is the recommended amount in dark blue. There is a bit of a range, as you will see. And in light blue, we say it's maybe appropriate, and yellow is, not recommended. So for a school-age child, we want to get between 9 and 11 hours of sleep. For a teenager, we're looking at more like 8 to 10. And for a young adult, or actually any adult, it's between 7 and 9. And as we get older, that sleep need drops potentially a little bit. So that is the recommendation, would be for a teenager to get between 8 and 10 hours. And if we look at this is just an example of some professional athletes, and this was a little while back. So you'll notice some of these athletes are actually retired at this point. But we do see different athletes like Roger Federer reporting between 11 and 12 hours, LeBron James, 12 hours, Michelle Wie, 10 to 12 hours. And so the majority of athletes on this screen, are definitely prioritizing sleep. Now we do see Tiger Woods. So there are anomaly athletes who, can potentially get by with less sleep. But in general, a lot of these athletes are prioritizing sleep. And folks like Roger Federer is, when he's at a competition, he's actually sleeping in a different house than potentially his family. And I think he has twins. So, yes,
Smart.
I mean, yeah, sleep is really, really important. And a lot of people a lot of athletes do prioritize it.
So I think that's a great segue, Dr. Bender, into could you share a little bit about Tiger Woods was the anomaly on there, and I'm not about to imply that maybe some of his back or soft tissue injuries are necessarily a result of his sleep. However, can you share a little bit about the relationship between sleep and injury?
Yes, I actually have a good slide on that as well.
Perfect.
Let me try this again here. I will say regarding Tiger Woods, I mean, he recently had that accident, and there was talk that potentially drowsy driving may have been a factor in that. I haven't followed up recently to see, but that's another important thing as well for adults, is that sleep deprivation can lead to potentially, drowsy driving or lapses in attention. And I'm not, pinning the cause of that accident on that by any means. But let me go ahead and share. Let's see here.
And while you're doing that, maybe the correlation with adolescence is reaction time and attention, and both are important for school and for sport, obviously.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you should be able to see that sleep and injury in young athletes. So this was an infographic done by Jan Lemure. So at YLM Sports Science, you can find really great infographics. And, there are some studies out there. So this Watson, they didn't really find a relationship between sleep duration and quality. But I would say the majority of the studies out there are showing this relationship. And I think it might have to do with potentially, I don't think we know why this is the case, but it could have to do with mechanics, potentially in the way people are running or jumping, that may be impacted by sleep deprivation, or it could do with decision making potentially, or slower reaction time. I think there's a number of different ways that this is the reason why.
When you went from 8 hours of sleep to 9 hours of sleep, that it was cutting the injuries in half. That was
yes.
the Milla something.
Milewski,
I don't remember. Milewski, yes.
Yes. Okay. When you do look at that chart specifically, you're right. The injury risk was about, I think, 30% for 8 hours. But then once you got to the 9 hours, it reduced it to about 15%. So yeah, you're right. Depending on how you analyze that study, that 9 hour or more for adolescents really reduced that injury risk to about 15%.
Let's stay on the injury and physical issues and the way sleep affects it a little bit. I read something that said, not only with sleep loss does it stop the healing and repair and recovery of an athlete if you're not getting enough sleep, but it can also cause like atrophy, thereby making the athlete weaker rather than stronger. Can you talk on this point about how it affects recovery and healing?
Well, as we progress through the sleep stages, so we start off in light stages of sleep, then we move on to deeper stages of sleep, and then we'll go into REM sleep, which is our dreaming sleep. And we oscillate these throughout the night so that by the end of the night, you're, 4 to 5 non-REM to REM sleep cycles. And one of the things in deep sleep that we see is growth hormone release. And so what we'll see is that during that deep sleep, we'll have more growth hormone release, which is related to repairing tissues, repairing muscles. So I could definitely see potentially an impact on that if people are missing out on sleep. Now, generally, I would say that we get a lot of our deepest stages of sleep in the first half of the night. So, this may not be a huge issue if you're getting at least a minimum of 6 hours, because you're likely to get a lot of that deeper stages of sleep. But if you're restricting it even more than that, there could definitely be an impact on that.
Is that why we see more soft tissue related injuries correlated with decreased sleep? It's because, in that initial 5-6 hours, the muscle fibers and the tendons and ligaments aren't fully healing. And so you're going out the next day with slightly damaged soft tissues.
Mm. Interesting. I think that's a good hypothesis. I don't know if the research has actually pinned that back down to sleep. I'm not sure, but that is a good educated guess.
We were just
one of the things I like to talk about is sleep helps athletes stay in the game. And I think there's multiple ways that it does this. One of this is related to injury risk, but another key area is as it relates to immunity. So we don't want to be sick throughout the season, because obviously that definitely impacts our performance potentially. So here is a study that was looking at sleep and how that protects against the common cold. And what they did was they looked at people's sleep objectively with a wrist wearable device coming into the study. And then they exposed everyone to the cold virus, so the rhinovirus. And what they found was that sleep was related to those who caught a cold. So sleep in general, the more sleep that you got, the less chance that you were to catch that cold. And then the lower amounts of sleep that you got, the higher the chances were for you to catch that cold. So in those people who are getting more than 7 hours of sleep, there was still a chance that they would catch the cold when they were exposed to that. So we're looking at about 17% of them caught the cold. But when they looked at those who were getting less than 5 hours, huge increase, almost half of the sample
crazy.
Ended up catching that cold. So there is a strong relationship between sleep and immunity. And one of that is related to inflammation. So with sleep deprivation, we see higher increases in inflammation. Another key factor is T cells. So T cells help fight off infection. And there's been some studies to show that T cells are less sticky, so they don't attach to the pathogen as well when there is sleep deprivation compared to normal sleep.
Fascinating. What about actual athletic performance? I know there are some studies out of Stanford that looked at basketball and football performance and increased free throw and field goal percentage and faster 40-yard times. And so, what does the research say across sports in terms of more sleep and athletic performance?
There's been a lot of research on banking sleep or sleep extension and how that relates to performance. So there was one study in particular where it was Stanford basketball players where they told players to be in bed for 10 hours. And they, hopefully you can't hear that. Can you hear that messaging? Okay, nope. Good. Sorry. So they told athletes to be in bed for 10 hours. These college athletes were getting about 7 hours of sleep. So right, even below the recommendation. And when they got more sleep, they found that they had better free throw percentage, better just shooting percentage in general. They had quicker reaction time. They had faster sprint times. Their mood was better, which can impact performance. So it's been shown to be useful in college basketball athletes, but also serving accuracy in tennis players, reaction time in rugby players. So there's been a number of studies to show that sleep is beneficial for athletic performance.
So we've talked about how sleep can impact your athletic performance. It can keep you healthier. It can potentially prevent injuries or help injuries recover faster. What about the psychological benefits of more sleep or the impacts of less sleep?
Mm-hmm. So I actually did a study on sleep duration and how that relates to depression.
We have a question really quick. Keep finding your thing, but Jonathan asks, if you nap, does that count as 1-to-1 with night sleeping? So night is 6 hours and you take a 2-hour nap. Is that the same as 8 hours a night? Does it correlate?
In general, I think it depends on how you split that up. So in general, like if you're getting, in general, I would not recommend a 2-hour nap. I know that sometimes that's not possible. For example, if you have a swimmer who has an early morning training time, because of the way their melatonin is being released, they're just not able to go to bed on time. So in those instances, yes, I would recommend a longer nap during the day. But we go through those cycles, and when those cycles are interrupted, we may be missing out a bit on that REM sleep, which is occurring in the last half of the night. So, I think if you're getting a minimum, let's say 7 hours, and you supplement with that hour nap, I think in that instance that it would be kind of a similar situation as if you were getting 8 hours at night. But the less and less sleep you get at night, the more it could have an impact. And so in general, you kind of want to get that minimum amount if possible. And even if you are getting, let's say 8 hours, I believe it's still beneficial to take that nap during the day because you're going to have boosts in alertness, boosts in mood. You're going to be more productive. So napping in general is a really good strategy that a lot of athletes actually don't take advantage of.
So what you're saying is get the minimum at night and then supplement that for a little added boost with a shorter nap during the day.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. So I'll talk about that sleep and mental health. So I can share my slide here. So this was a survey that we sent out all across the world. So we had over 150 countries represented, I believe, if I remember right. And we were asking people to tell us the amount of sleep that they were getting per night. And we were looking at different questions as it related to depression. So we also had them fill out a validated depression survey. And what we found was that of those that were recommended for depression evaluation, so once they hit a certain score, they would be either recommended for evaluation or strongly recommended for depression evaluation. So of those that were recommended, we found that, about 2/3 had less than 7 hours of sleep. This is in an adult population. And many of them, 3%, I guess, had more than 9 hours of sleep. So remember that recommendation for an adult is between 7 and 9 hours. So it appeared that if you look at the left side of this graph, this is the depression score on the vertical axis, and this is short sleepers, so less than 5 hours, 5 hours. So these short sleepers had a very high depression score, with long sleepers as well, so more than 10 hours, having a high depression score, with the sweet spot being at about 7.5 hours. So those people who reported about 7.5 hours had actually the lowest depression scores. So really, and this has been replicated across the research. We know that sleep definitely plays a role in mental health. And we even know that anecdotally from ourselves. If you have a poor night's sleep, we definitely have mood disturbances the next day. So yeah, this is really important. It's important for physical health, but also important for mental health as well.
How about, we're all parents here, and I'm sure we know that our kids like to sleep in on the weekends. So talk to us about banking sleep. I know there's been some conflicting things in the literature. So can you bank sleep? In other words, can you get a lot of sleep on the weekend to make up for sleep that you might be losing during the week?
At the extreme level, it's not a good idea to sleep until noon on the weekend. So we call this social jet lag, actually. So social jet lag is the mismatch between your sleep schedule on work days or school days compared to what it looks like on free days. So the weekend in most people's cases. And what we find with the research is that the more social jet lag that you have, the more mood disturbances we see, the less academic performance. We see poor academic performance with more social jet lag. So having a consistent sleep schedule is important. For me, I kind of use the 90-minute rule. So in general, you want to keep your bedtimes and your wake times consistent during the week, and then potentially extend your sleep on the weekends by no more than 90 minutes, trying to get to bed earlier, and maybe sleep in a little bit of time. Once we go beyond that 90-minute mark, our brain and our body do not know when they should be awake and when they should be asleep. So if I'm sleeping until noon on the weekend, it's going to take longer and longer and longer for my homeostatic process, my sleep drive to build up, so that if I sleep until noon, it may take me until 3 a.m. to be sleepy again, so that plays an important role in this. And this is why we do see a lot of Sunday night insomnia. Now, part of that's related to having to go to work the next day, but part of it is related to sleeping in on the weekends and then not being tired at our normal, usual time.
What about the opposite of that? And so for so many of us parents with kids in youth sports, they're getting up at the crack of dawn to take, to drive them to tournaments far away. And it's a consistent thing of getting up early. Is there anything that we can do, or what should we do to sort of combat that problem?
Napping is a good one. So for myself, my son is 3 years old. My youngest is 3 years old. There are times when he'll wake me up during the middle of the night, and he shares a room. So whenever I hear him, I want to kind of jump on it as soon as I can so he doesn't wake up everyone else. But for me, when that happens, I will try techniques to fall asleep. So I'll do the 4-7-8 breathing technique. I'll do the cognitive shuffle. And then if I can't get to bed, if I'm still not sleepy enough, I'll get up out of bed, do a relaxing activity until I'm sleepy. And there are times where I don't go back to sleep. So I'm up at 4 a.m. I'm not tired enough to go back to sleep. So in that instance, I will plan a nap during the day, and that saves me, and it doesn't have to be a long hour-and-a-half nap. It can be even just a 20-minute nap, a 10-minute nap. So that is a good strategy for parents who are having to get up really early on the weekends, potentially schedule in a nap, and you can go out to your car and just, relax. And
what about the kids? So they're getting up at the crack of dawn and losing all that sleep. And it's hard to get a teenager to go to bed at 8:30 so that they can get their 8 hours, but they have to be up at 5:30 or 6 a.m. Would you recommend you get them out of bed, put them in the car, and have them sleep on the way there? Like, is that a good solve for that? Because this is a definite issue. I think so many of these sports start early, and parents are having to get their kids up out of bed super early.
Yes, I mean, sleep in the car as much as possible would
But it won't make you groggy when you get like taking that nap in the car. I'm always like, I don't know, is that going to make her get there and be sort of out of it, or that social, you had a term for it, or is that it's worth it, right? So if you have an hour-long ride, 2-hour-long ride, if you have to get up super early, let them sleep the bulk of that ride.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. And usually when you're arriving at the destination, you do have a little bit of time before you're actually having to compete. Yeah. So usually we usually see 60 minutes or so of potential sleep inertia, which is that grogginess. So usually you will have enough time to kind of snap out of that. Yeah. Getting, like, once you arrive at the destination, if there is light outside, I would recommend, going for a walk, getting a lot of that bright light exposure outside, which can be as much as 200 times brighter than our indoor lighting. So that will help wake them up as well, eliminate some of that melatonin. And it's almost as if, sleeping from, let's say, 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. would be kind of a normal part of their sleep schedule anyway. So I would definitely recommend that sleep during the car ride.
The car ride. Okay.
Dr. Bender, you mentioned a couple of strategies that you'll try, and maybe we can put some links to those, up when we put the recording of this up. What about kids and melatonin? Are there foods that can help melatonin? Is it safe for kids to take melatonin supplements? Talk to us about that.
There are some foods that do promote melatonin, and this area of research is in its infancy. So I personally don't take, supplements to optimize my melatonin, but there are things like tart cherry juice has been shown to promote melatonin at night. Potentially kiwis is another one. So kiwi fruit. And then, protein before bedtime as well. It helps improve sleep quality. Fiber is a good one that is going to help improve sleep quality. So there's definitely some things to think about there. Now, when it comes to melatonin supplements, generally they are pretty safe. So they are pretty safe. The research shows that they're very useful for jet lag and chronotype problems. So if you have a night owl that you're working with, even just 0.5 milligrams of melatonin has been shown to help shift their rhythms to an earlier time. But just to use as a general hypnotic or help a person fall asleep. The research shows that it's just as good as a sugar pill. So that's something to be aware of. The other caveat is that you do not know what you're getting with this supplement. So there was a study that showed about 80% of these sampled melatonin products were not complying with what the label was saying. So there was only 20% that were actually giving you the amount of melatonin that you were expecting from the bottle.
Make sure it's a trusted brand. Yeah.
Yes. So Natural Factors is a good brand, and I don't get any payback from them for that, but we have used that brand with our Canadian Olympic team athletes, and it's been tested by the WADA, or the Drug Administration, when it comes to athletes. So that is a decent brand. But in general, I would not recommend melatonin as a cure-all to help with these sleep problems.
I know that, like, for most parents and most of these athletes, right, they're so busy with school, their sports, time is the biggest factor, right? Trying to get your homework done, get your sports practice in, and get to bed in time. There's nothing, I don't know that there's much of a solve we can help with there, but I would, I would love to hear more about, you had mentioned the 4-7-8 breathing and the cognitive shuffle. So give us a few more tips, if you will, on things that we can have some control over, some things that parents can teach their kids to do.
Mm-hmm. Number one is a good pre-sleep routine, and this kind of leads into that. So putting away the electronic devices an hour before bedtime, I know, which can be very difficult to break that behavior. And especially if they're working on homework up right until bedtime. So having potentially blue light blocking glasses, which is going to block out a lot of that light that we're most sensitive to. So I use those occasionally when I'm working late at night. I'll wear these blue light blocking glasses, which has been shown to help. Now, it's not perfect by any means. So the best piece of advice would be to put away those devices before bedtime. But having a good bedtime routine, starting with an alarm. So we all set morning alarms, but let's start setting a bedtime alarm. And then that will be the cue for us to start that pre-sleep routine, put away those electronics before bedtime. Taking a warm bath or shower has been shown to improve the amount of time it takes you to fall asleep. So you fall asleep quicker with a warm bath or shower. Writing a to-do list before bedtime. So a lot of, we have all these thoughts running through our head. And let's start putting them on paper and put them away, before bedtime, which has been shown to be really helpful for falling asleep quicker. And then having those techniques either to fall asleep at the beginning of the night, the 4-7-8 breathing. So you breathe in for 4 seconds, hold your breath for 7 seconds, breathe out for 8 seconds. And you repeat that 4 times. That helps activate the parasympathetic nervous system. Also having the cognitive shuffle. So you think of a word such as bedtime. You imagine all the objects you can, starting with B, ball, baby, bus, banana. Move on to the next letter, E, eagle, egg, ear. And hopefully by the time you get to the end of the word, you'll be sound asleep. I've actually adjusted that for my own kids who are 8, 6, 3-year-old doesn't really do it quite yet. But we think of a color like red, for example, and I just have them imagine all the objects they can that have the color red in it. So strawberry, raspberry, even like a red shirt or red pants, and it helps simulate what our brain does when we start falling asleep. So when we fall asleep, we kind of have these images going through our head. So it helps simulate what's going on before we fall asleep. It also takes our mind off, being angry about not being able to go to sleep. So those are some good techniques. And then when this happens during the middle of the night, which I mentioned previously, I try those techniques. If I still can't go to sleep, you want to get up out of bed, do a relaxing activity, and then only return back to bed when you're sleepy. So if it's been about 20 minutes, you don't want to stare at the clock by any means, but you only want to return back to bed when you're sleepy. So those are some helpful techniques, having that pre-sleep routine and having some of these techniques to take your mind off of having trouble sleeping will hopefully be useful for people.
Absolutely.
Oh, definitely.
So let's say our kids have a big tournament over the weekend where they're going to be playing 3 or 4 or 5 games or, the such, and probably going to start very early on a Saturday morning. What should the sleep schedule look like for the week to maximize their performance on the weekend? Is it just keep it regular, or do you have other suggestions?
Well, I didn't touch on your question about banking sleep too much, but that is a strategy for people to bank sleep leading into an important competition. And the research has shown that if you get more sleep, so bank sleep, you're extending your sleep either with going to bed early, maybe sleeping in a little bit more, maybe taking a nap. When we hit those sleep deprivation periods where they're having to wake up at 5 a.m. to get to a tournament, they actually perform better if they have more sleep than usual leading into that competition. So I would say trying to, if we know, well, number one, if we have an important competition coming up, we want to bank sleep into that. But also, if we know that we are going to be experiencing sleep deprivation, banking sleep is going to help us perform better during that sleep deprivation. So yeah, I would say trying to get to bed a little bit earlier if possible, maybe prepare for the next day, have everything ready to go so that you can sleep in a little bit longer, and then trying to get some of those naps will help people as they approach those important competitions, as well as, as they approach sleep deprivation.
That's helpful.
You touched a little bit on some foods and vitamins and things that can help you to try to fall asleep. Let's say your kid didn't get enough sleep. It's a quick ride to the game. Is there anything that you recommend that can kind of get them more prepared, get them more focused, get them together as far as a vitamin or a drink, or is there anything at that point when sleep is off the table? Is there something else that we can be doing?
Light comes to mind for sure. Light is really important. And there's you can use a light box, for example, and this will help improve alertness. I actually found some light glasses. So there's actually a few companies that make light glasses where you can wear them even over your normal glasses, and you do that for 15, 20 minutes in the morning. And that will really provide a boost in alertness. So that is something people can do. For myself, I mean, when you do want to optimize your alertness. So light is a big one for me. Also exercise. So maybe, they'll probably do warm-ups and such like that, but exercise helps kind of boost some of that alertness as well. Limited caffeine, so strategic caffeine use can be a good one, although we got to be aware of the impact on nighttime sleep. So those would be my 3 kind
like
of
a frappuccino or like a little coffee drink on the way to the game. Sometimes I'll have my coffee and I'm like, here, take a sip. Okay, I know I probably shouldn't do that, but I'm like, is that really bad? Or you're saying that might be okay occasionally if you need it?
I think it's okay occasionally. I'll have to look into this research a little more, because I thought I heard at one point that just even like a half a can of Coke was shown to be good for, now I'm not promoting soda drinking here by any means, but I'm talking about a little bit of caffeine. It could be, a green tea or something along those lines, where healthier. Not necessarily a full-on venti frappuccino or anything, but Yeah, I think a little bit of caffeine can be useful for performance. We just want to be aware of the impact on sleep. And I'll just mention this study. I love talking about this study where they gave teenagers an energy drink at dinner time. And they asked the teenagers, do you think this impacted your sleep overall? And the majority of them said, no, it didn't impact my sleep. I fell asleep in the same amount of time. I got the same amount of sleep that I usually do. But when they looked at their deep sleep, they actually saw a 25% reduction.
Wow, that's interesting.
In deep sleep, where growth hormones are being released, our tissues are being repaired, our muscles are being repaired. So you may not think caffeine is impacting you, but on a more fine-grained level, it very well could be.
All right, we've been... Oh, sorry,
ahead,
Dr. Sam, go ahead, and then I'm going to wrap it up here. I think
okay. Yeah, so if you have any questions, get them in soon because we're going to wrap it up here. So you mentioned light glasses and light boxes. If somebody were to go shop for one, what specification should they be looking for?
Personally, I like the Luminette light glasses. So these are full spectrum light. So full spectrum is just kind of simulating what we would get with natural light. So that's something for people to look out for. Ideally, you want to get full spectrum light unless you are really sensitive to light. And then you would probably want to get more of that blue or green light specifically. So that's one thing. And then another thing is the brightness. So usually with a light box, we want to get about 10,000 lux. Now with the light glasses, obviously that's closer to you. So you don't need to be as concerned about that. So those are two things to look out for, is the spectrum of the light as well as the brightness of the light. And personally, I like the Luminette light glasses because they offer a good brightness as well as offer that full spectrum light.
Well, we are almost out of time. As Dr. Sam said, if anyone has a question they want to get in before we wrap it up here, I do think we didn't touch on it much, but we'd be doing everyone a disservice not to mention how important sleep is also just to academics and to school and to homework. I mean, we're talking about athletes, but obviously it has the same effect mentally with their focus and everything when they're at school and doing homework at night. And that's another huge plus of getting enough sleep.
Absolutely. Yes. The research shows, even actually, for example, if you take later school start times, they're showing with later school start times, kids are getting more sleep and their academic performance is improving on all these standardized tests. There's less car crashes for these kids driving in, so yes, absolutely. It impacts academic performance.
So Jonathan, with a question here, do you think sleep masks can help, especially with people that struggle to fall asleep?
Sleep masks, absolutely. So one of the things I talk about, we haven't talked about environment much so far, but having a cave-like environment, cool, dark, and quiet. So part of that would be having blackout blinds, potentially, having earplugs, and then that eye mask as well will be helpful for people, and making sure the environment is cool. Typically below 70 degrees is kind of what we would recommend. So those are really useful. One thing we haven't touched on though, is if you really are struggling with your sleep, you want to seek help from a sleep professional. Now, so any of the parents out there, you don't want to try and solve it on your own. If you have an athlete, your child is an athlete, you can go to centerforsleep.com and we'll put maybe a link somewhere where you can have your athlete take the athlete sleep screening questionnaire, which I helped develop. And this is a good way to gauge whether or not you have a problem. So this is a great tool where you fill out a few questions and then you're able to know, okay, do I need to seek help from a sleep professional, or am I okay? So that'll be a good resource. And it also gives you some sleep education tips as well.
Great. So that's centerforsleep.com. Is that center ER or RE?
RE. I'm
Of
here
course.
in Canada. Oh, yeah. Sorry.
I just did it wrong.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
RE. Center for
Those
Sleep.
Canadians.
RE, centerforsleep.com. Here it goes. Here's the right one.
And I also have to say, follow Dr. Bender on Twitter or Instagram. She's a great follow, and that is Sleep for Sport, correct? With 4 being the number.
Yes, you can catch me on Instagram or Twitter. And I'm also trying to develop a website, sleepwelltowin.com. I'm not quite there yet, but if you follow me on social media, you'll be able to kind of hear what I'm up to and when that will be ready.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Bender. I know I sure learned a lot, and I hope everyone else did. And we'll put all of your information up and definitely be sharing this more with our audience. And Dr. Sam, as always, thank you. That was really great, and we really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks, Asia. Thank you, Dr. Sam, for having me. I'm happy to get the word out, and yeah, maybe we can do a part 2 sometime.
I'd
Sounds
love
great.
that. All right, bye, guys.